Perfect. So I guess that's about it. I'll give it a go and I'll give it a start. Pragati, you there?
Yes, I'm there, Paras.
Perfect, perfect. So hi everyone. Good evening. My name is Paras Pundir, and I'm taking care of Microsoft Reactor Bangalore. This is our new series which we are starting today. It's called Security Speak, right? On point. And this is going to go under Azure Happy Hours again, which is a old series. We have been running such sessions for long now. And uh, from our team, we had Pragati to help us host this, and who leads our team from Microsoft. And we have three beautiful ladies today to help us with the panel and to kickstart this whole series, which is going to be focused on the security part, the data security part, and we have some set of questions which Pragati will be taking care of and asking everyone. And what we want you to do is to keep your mics on mute till the time few people are talking. And then if you have any questions, either you can raise hand or you can put your question in the message or in the chat box. And even if you want to have a lot more deeper conversations, then we are on Teams, so you can easily unmute yourself. You can have a good conversation, and that's the whole perspective. That's the whole purpose of this overall session today, so that we all can quickly come together on some good insights which we really want for ourselves when we invest our right 1 hour, because we have chosen to be here. So that's about it. I'll not take much of the time, and it's almost about to be 7:05, which is my cue. So I'll leave it and I'll give it to Pragati, who will start and introduce you to all the panelists today. And here we go. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Paras, and thanks for hosting us at Microsoft Reactor. My name is Pragati Rai, and I lead developer relations for Microsoft in India. And I work very closely with Paras on different initiatives. Today, it's very special for me because we are kicking off a new series called Security Speak series under the Azure Happy Hour banner. Now, what that means is every month we will come to you with a talk, a panel, or a workshop, or sharing a use case on security by one of our experts. And I actually welcome you to send suggestions on what you would like to hear more from us. But this session, this Security Speak series, will be open to all domains of security, be data, cloud, networking, you name it. And make it yours, and send us comments and suggestions on what you would like to hear from us. With this, I am very excited to kickstart this series with three very experienced panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We have Smriti Kumar, we have Sujata Yakasiri, and we have Mrs. Satyavati Deva. I call her Satya. So I'll just stick to Satya and let Satya introduce herself. Yeah. So Satya, over to you, followed by Sujata and Smriti. Please introduce yourself and we'll kickstart.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Pragati. First of all, hi everyone. Very good evening. First of all, thank you very much for having me, Pragati, as part of this panel. I'm very much happy to be part of this along with other women leaders like you, Satyaji and Smriti. And also, it is my pleasure to be part of this Microsoft Security Speak launch series, right? So myself, Sujata Yakasiri, I'm here today representing Besides Bangalore, which is a community-driven cybersecurity conference founded by me and Ashok Ratnagiri. So this is one of my voluntary roles with the intention to contribute back to the community. I currently work as a senior computer scientist at Azure, which is an Infosys company. I am having around 14 plus years of experience with expertise including application security, pen testing, source code reviews, and threat modeling and Docker security. I also hold a couple of industry standard certifications like CISSP and CEH. Previous to this organization, I worked with Infosys, IDS, and Dover Corporation. with respect to my passion, so I'm very much passionate about cybersecurity and increasing the women participation in the field of cybersecurity, mentoring and motivating the young generations to get into the field of cybersecurity. So with that in mind, I have taken up many other voluntary roles which are women-centric and student-centric to empower them. This is just a brief about me, so you can find more about me on my LinkedIn. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself, Pragati.
Thanks, Sujata. And I know you have started many communities in the security domain. So your, what should I say, enthusiasm is infectious. Over to you, Satya.
I think since we are on the community driven, maybe I'll start there too, right? Let me give my name. My name is Satyavati Devadari, but in short, most of the people call me Satya. Just don't worry about the long name, just call me Satya. I do also do some parts of community as much as I can. And part of one of the group, which is called Cloud Security Alliance. I do lead the Bangalore chapter. We are actually doing various research initiatives, and we are also actually working with working to extend our cooperation with students in academia as well as professionals to see how well we can share the knowledge and also build some new white papers and research material from India. That's one thing which we are working on, right? Individually, I am actually, if you want to know where I am working now, right now I'm working in Micro Focus as a chief cyber security architect and principal partner advisor. So what that means is actually providing solutions what they are looking for. That's what I do for a living. Apart from that, I also been on advisory panel for EC Council on various areas. That's on the Global Council, and also on the mentor panel for women in cybersecurity, and very enthusiastic to have more women in this forum. Good that actually, good to see that Microsoft is doing such an initiative with all beautiful women around here. Pragati told me that we are actually starting this reactor. What is the best way? The best way it is to start with women. So that's a good initiative per se. Yeah. So I think I'll stop there without boring you with my own story of what I am, etc. You can always find me on LinkedIn. Yeah. Back to you, Smriti.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you Pragati and Vivek, who actually reached out to me about this particular engagement, and I'm thrilled to be here with all the lovely ladies and all the experienced folks. And I'm looking forward to learn a lot from this experience. Talking about me, I have over 6 years of experience in the industry now. I started off my journey as a woman in security with McAfee, and I've been part of network security teams since 2014. And right now I'm working for a startup. It's called Lavelle Networks. It's India's #1 networking solution provider. And we are doing some cool stuff in the space of network security and SD-WAN. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you so much, Pragati.
Thank you, Smriti. And just to give a perspective, I'm a technologist myself, and I have a lot of experience at Android security. So any questions around that, I'll be happy to take them. With that, I wanted to kick off the panel and ask the panelists a question around, around the current situation, right? So we are in a very unforeseen circumstances these days with COVID and other issues coming up. And this has actually increased the rate of transformation. So let me start off with you, Smriti. Smriti, tell me, you have a lot of experience in network security. What are some of the trends that you are seeing here? And especially from a security perspective, and what have these changes in the environment today have brought in? So I'll be happy to hear your perspective, Smriti, on that. And also to all the people here, we want to keep it as informal as possible. So please type your questions on the chat. I have a few questions prepared, but I think it will be more engaging if you send out the questions on the chat. So just type in or unmute yourself and ask a question. So yes, Smriti, Give us your perspective.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question, actually, Pragati. I think that's the best way to start. Looking back, I would like to start from the history of the whole network transformation. So right now, we all are witnessing Industry 4.0, which is the fourth industrial revolution. We started off with the first one, basically man-made things started being done through a machine. So man-to-machine conversion happened as part of first revolution. In second revolution, we saw a lot of need to connect people and ideas. So second industrial revolution saw the demand for rail networks and telegraphs so that people and ideas can move along with this transformation. After Third World War came in the third industrial revolution, and that basically embarked the technology, the computer technology coming in, and advancement in communication technologies as such. So after witnessing a war, we realized, oh, we need to communicate more often, and we need to fix that problem of connecting people. And now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. We are not just connecting people, we are connecting a lot of things around. And especially the COVID era is just reiterating the fact that how much it is required to connect everything around, and all the new technologies like AI, IoT, 5G that's coming up. You have quantum computing. All these are part of fourth generation of industrial revolution. And I see there is a lot of demand from networking, and there's a huge demand for networking technologies to emerge to a scale that it supports the whole ecosystem of fourth industrial revolution, right? So from connecting people to connecting things, you see, if we take example of enterprise itself, there was a time within the fourth industrial revolution when it started off, enterprises had a data center, they had their head offices, and then there were branches which were connected through a private link. So that was the perimeter of enterprise. Now that perimeter seems to have evolved to a level that you cannot even define a perimeter. So from a castle and moat topology, we are moving towards more of a distributed topology of the whole network, and you cannot trust anybody. Like, you have bring your own devices policies in company. People can work from Starbucks. They used to work from Starbucks. Now Starbucks has moved back home. Everybody is working from their home, and there's a huge challenge in front of various industrialists, various companies, how to connect their people, their things within their enterprise ecosystem, and at the same time ensure security. Because earlier, when somebody is working from branch office, they are in the secure network of the branch, and now all of a sudden everybody is connected from everybody everywhere possible, and network security has become a great challenge. So that is the kind of transformation that I'm seeing. And the main essence of the whole transformation is the movement of perimeter. So it has basically evolved. That is my point of view on the transformation, and there is a huge demand definitely in terms of security from network side, from application side. Yeah. We can't hear you, Pragati.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Satya, I know you work a lot with the customers and you help them design solutions around security. I know there has been a rush in digital transformation where people are moving on to cloud. So what are some of the challenges and what are some of the trends that you are seeing on that piece?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Pragati. So I'll ask you just for fun, right? So nowadays we are sitting in at home. Majority of the time, our families are watching Netflix or Amazon Prime, where the workloads are. Netflix operates 100% on cloud. Imagine if they were operating maybe around 1,000 servers earlier, maybe now they might have doubled it, right? Because of the trend and demand of the points, the way it is happening. If only the media and other organizations were using cloud earlier, and not only that, at that time, I mean, before COVID, let's say, some of the banks, which I know, never allowed people to work from home or anywhere. They have to come to office to connect to their machines. They're not allowed to take their laptops. They have to come to that secure place and access to do the financial transaction. Today, everybody is working from home. Whatever the financial transactions are, they're also happening from home, right? Which means it's actually bringing a new dynamics, which means slowly even the banks or all the regulated organizations are also looking forward to move to cloud, right? That's a different scenario altogether. And imagine that. And that's one trend. Second is economy, right? So the economy is growing it's going so down now. People do not want to spend upfront investment for servers and infrastructure, etc. They prefer to actually pay as much I sell, maybe that much let me invest, right? So pay as you go is only offered on cloud. So instead of actually going to a traditional data center, they prefer on cloud. And in case they are paying already for data centers, then now they are moving towards cloud, right? These are the changes which are visible. And because of these kind of transformation which we are seeing, I think that you might have seen some of the IT organizations told that we are actually closing, I think, 50 to 100 offices. You might have seen, I don't want to call the company's name, but around 50,000 people will not be going to office at all after COVID. So there are certain dynamics coming in. This all means more towards actually location, what we can say, operate from anywhere, get the data from anywhere, right? Sit wherever you like, but do work, right? So this is bringing into multiple dimensions. One dimension is about no boundaries anymore, right? There are no boundaries. And nobody is bothered whether, is it okay for the employee to connect from a particular environment? Earlier, they used to say, you know what, you need to have two-factor authentication to enter into a campus. Then you sit there, and then nobody should be sitting around you, seeing around you. There are a lot of controls. So what is happening now, it's actually in a scenario called zero trust. So you need to verify and validate before providing access, which is bringing dynamics of how do we actually improve our identity access management? How do we handle the data, which is crucial? And also, how do we transfer the workloads in case we are moving towards the cloud, right? So there are too many dynamics, or we can say too many moving pieces in this journey to make the business grow. And what we can say, two areas, right? One is how the business can optimize their own revenues, right? Which is actually reduce the costs. And second is, how can they build to market faster? That is your DevSecOps, etc. So these are the two major things or motivators for people to move to cloud. And that is actually because of that motivation. So obviously, when we are doing that, we need to think about the concerns that become security controls and things like that. We can talk about all of that maybe in the upcoming, but the trends what we are seeing is very clear that most people are moving to digital transformation. Now universities are offering courses online, right? Schools never thought of computer and mobile earlier. Now schools are offering classes on mobile or on internet. How they can do? They can't do it with a upfront investment of a large data center or server, right? They are actually going towards some use as a service model. Those are all majorly built on cloud. So yeah, these are the dynamics which we are seeing, and I think it's a major change to the entire economy as well as the industry.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Satya, because I just like last week, I opened a joint account with my father, and earlier for KYC, I would have to go to the bank or they would send somebody for me to sign papers and then all of that thing. But this time I was able to do KYC on phone and through email, so very easy. So yes, lots of changes happening, especially in the banking sector also. And also with that, right, a lot of applications are also moving on the cloud. So Sujata, when these applications move on the cloud, like what we are seeing, so many applications moving on the cloud, what are the challenges? I know you've done a lot of work on the Kubernetes, Dockers, microservices side. So tell us a little bit about, give your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I would like to take off from where Satyaji had mentioned about situation in mind. So no doubt, as everyone said, over the past few months, the COVID has thrown many unprecedented challenges at various enterprises and institutes. But to name one sector, okay, which has emerged as a strong player from this pandemic event is, it would be obviously cloud computing industry. Okay, that is the need of the hour, right? So I would like to take two examples which are already touch based upon, but I would like to put it in a different way. With the current pandemic situation, enterprises are very badly and worstly affected, but they do want their employees to be more productive working remotely. So the adoption of online collaboration platforms has increased exponentially, and also the demand for the virtual private cloud is also increasing. So overall, I mean, all these collaboration platforms are again are based on the cloud platforms, right? So similarly, as Satyavati ji rightly mentioned about the OTT platforms like Amazon, Netflix, so their subscription base is surged, right? So it made people to glue into the Amazon, Netflix, things like that, right? But to provide the seamless video streaming experience for these many number of subscribers, again, the cloud has emerged as a great choice for them, right? So similarly, if you see the trends, every small, medium, large scale businesses, are started thinking about, digitization solutions. So cloud computing definitely is in high demand, and it is the need of the hour, right? So now in the current situation, if you talk about that, there is no physical interaction, and also there are a lot of restrictions around the pandemic situation, right? So if you ask me about migrating the applications to the cloud, right, without having ability to interact in person, right? So if at all I have to talk about the emerging technologies in the cloud, which helps the applications to migrate smoothly into the cloud, these are nothing but the Docker containerization and Kubernetes and DevSecOps. So these are the emerging trends and technologies in the cloud computing, which will help applications to migrate smoothly and successfully, because people wants to fail fast, so they want to take the prototypes very fast to the market, right? So in that case, the Docker container helps people to build their applications once and run anywhere, right? So that the developers can concentrate on the actual code that should go into the container, rather than worrying about where this particular code should be running, on which system this should be running, and things like that, right? So in addition to that, if they start using the Kubernetes orchestration platform, so this will also increase the productivity of the employees, because this will help people to automate the application deployments, right? So this will also help the industries to auto scale and auto scale up and auto scale down and things like that, and it will be helpful to maintain the containers in a easy manner, right? So if you take the statistics about the right scale state of the cloud 2019 report, there is a increase in the adoption of container technology. So it has increased to 66%. Increase in the adoption of containers, and 60% on the Kubernetes side, right? So it is also good time to start thinking about the DevSecOps journey, because DevSecOps, the motive is nothing but, so automation is the driving force behind the DevSecOps. So it will help people to automate everything that is possible, which is done manually today, right? So that will help people to start thinking about the security right from the beginning, rather than at the end of the life cycle, right? So these are the three technologies that I can think from application standpoint, which will help the developers and the people who are involved in migrating these applications into the cloud.
Yeah, and like all three of you said, right, that lot of applications moving on to the cloud, digital transformation, where everything that we are doing and processing is moving to cloud, what happens to data? Ms. Satya, tell us what is your point on, data, lots of data, if everybody's watching Netflix, everybody is using cloud for everything. Tell us I mean, I'm worried about the data. What do you say?
You shouldn't be worried. You should be consuming it. Okay, so that somebody can mine it. You know that, right? So this is the discussion, or it's already a trend. The saying is, data is the new oil, right? Data is the new wealth, right? That is where people are mining a lot. There are a lot of companies who are mining and getting a lot of money out of it, by the way, right? So thinking that data is the new oil, data is the deciding factor. Why data is the deciding factor? Let's think about the cloud journey per se. If somebody has to move an application from on-prem to cloud, first thing they decide is, okay, what data is there? Can I move the data? Is it classified? Is it sensitive? Is it okay to move? Or is it really proprietary that I shouldn't be moving? So this is all decided based on the data, right? That is data discovery and classification, which is very important, right? And second is, imagine this, right? If you don't do the data classification properly, so the crown jewels, what the Queen of England wears, also equal to the rubbish, practically, if you don't classify. Obviously, right? Think about that way. Just imagine that if you don't classify, the crown is actually somewhere lying in the corridor, but the rubbish is actually in the locker. Imagine that way, right? So, and how do you actually secure this data? In case, we are saying, data need to be secured. I understand. I classified. This is the secure data. And what do you do? How do you handle it, right? So imagine again the same princess or queen's crown, right? What do? You put in maybe under 3-4 lockers and lock it up, correct? When you are storing it, right? So that's the same thing applies to sensitive data and confidential data, and ensure that you are actually encrypting it and keeping under multi-layer security, and also actually ensure that application is also protected. And even you do have some monitoring mechanism that the key is not stolen, the keys are managed properly, and you are ensuring that the locker is actually kept in a safe place, which is again your infrastructure security and your physical security. All those layers you ensure for storage. And how about usage of data, right? How do you actually use the data, right? So again, same thing. When the queen is actually wearing the crown, obviously there will be multiple bodyguards around. Obviously, right? Not just the queen alone, but also the crown matters. So we need to also think about that. When the data is moving, if it is sensitive data, we ensure that it is actually passing through a secure tunnel or secure channel. Is your application channel, whatever you are using, is it encrypted? Is it actually running on security, TLS channel or whatever? So the transition happens smoothly, the usage happens smoothly. And every time when you are using the data, picking the data and putting it back, right? All those transactions are recorded, analyzed, right? Who has picked the lock? Who has taken that crown out and actually transferred to the person rightly? And from there, where it went, which is called your data access and usage, right? So when it is actually sensitive data, we need to take care of all these elements, right? But we don't see all that. We just access the data and handle it, right? But consider that it's actually really a sensitive information or something really confidential. We need to take care of all that. And then finally, in thinking about, we just spoke about usage and storage, right? How about transit? If you want to actually send this crown somewhere, again, you do the same thing, multi-locker, multi-layer, and then you put multiple keys, and the keys are with 3 people or 4 people so that it reaches safely, and then the keys are transferred in a different, right? That's the way it handled, right? Same thing applies to the data also. Even it applies to even the cloud data. When you are actually keeping in a particular container, then you need to ensure the keys are managed properly. And then you are actually ensuring that the encryption is handled properly. And the keys are not handled, I mean, what you can say, not lying or not get lost. These are not like, one thing is keys are not lost, and second is they are handled properly. So these are the 3 things which we should handle when we are handling data, whether it is on-prem, whether it is on the cloud, or is it in the transition.
Yeah, thanks Satya for that. And so today in the newspaper, I was reading that the Telangana government is building their secretariat building, and it will be equipped with IoTs all around. So even the thermal sensor, who gets in, who moves out, maintaining the temperature, almost they said it is going to be a technological marvel with IoT devices everywhere. So Smriti, tell me, we can secure the data on the cloud, but these IoT devices are there everywhere collecting the data, right? And then moving it to cloud. How secure is that? Because they are almost everywhere. They're integral parts of my life today. So tell me what you think around that.
Yeah, you're right. With Internet of Things and the way we are connecting things these days, it has become a very big responsibility of network to actually take care of whatever these IoT devices are communicating back to cloud and to the internet, what they are bringing back from there in terms of all the botnet attacks. Are they becoming a bot in themselves and penetrating into our network? So there are two parts of it, Pragati. There is a consumer market for IoT. That is something which is very difficult to manage. So if we talk about the IoT, industrial IoT, that reference that you gave, like smart cities, smart waste management, all these state vans coming up to connect the whole state infrastructure. They incorporate industrial IoT and cellular IoTs, and there are various intricacies when it comes to the network connectivity of these IoT devices. There are short range connectivity channels, which are called low power WANs, which will connect maybe few sensors or few IoT devices within a certain range. And then there are long range WAN connectivity between one part of the state to another, or from one state to the other, for all these smart cities and all. So overall, if you see, the intention for any attack is basically either to take your data, either take control of your system so that you are basically handicapped and people can do nasty things, hackers can do nasty things within your network. And third could be that they want to steal your resources. So when it comes to IoT, a lot of control related aspect and data is at risk, because resources wise, if you see, sorry, I'm getting some background noise. Can somebody please go on mute? Yeah. Okay. So if you see, there is a lot of stake on data and the control when it comes to IoT, and the kind of the scale of this IoT attacks is not small. The social impact is major here. And one reference I'll take here is that of 4 years back, we had heard about this Ukraine power grid attack. Which was conducted by some Russian hackers, and then the power grid for Ukraine went down in some part of Ukraine, and that basically affected more than couple of hours of electricity supply for many residents in that particular part of the state. And that actually handicaps the economy. It affects a lot of industries in the state. So that kind of attacks are very prevalent when it comes to IoT, and especially at the industry scale. So we have to understand the social impact also of these devices. The reason why such impactful and at scale attacks happen for IoT is because if you find vulnerability in one sensor, and in smart city, if you have thousands or 10,000s of sensors to manage the electricity at the electricity poles of the city, it becomes easy. If you got through one, you can get through 10,000 of them, and then maybe do a network scan in the whole network and try and get whatever the hacker is intending to do into the network, be it control or the data. So this direct approach of IoT from the device to the internet has to be controlled in that industrial scale. And that is where we have to introduce technologies where you have to go indirect from IoT device back to the internet, and that management has to happen in between through a wide area network connectivity in the terms of SD-WAN, or doing a secure access service edge deployment, so that you have some policies, you have some control for this scale of IoT devices, and then they go through a filter. They have some content filtering, they have some ACL policies defined, and that is what the sanity of IoT will define, and that will actually lead to a more secure and more sane IoT network for industrial scale. There is one more aspect when it comes to IoT. A lot of these communications, since these are very small devices, they don't have a lot of processing power. And when it comes to encryption, tunneling, and all those fancy stuff which we hear in security, which are required when we do data transmission, it is very difficult to deploy in such a small device, which is hardly having any processing power. So that is where it is important to utilize the power of software defined networking and the kind of capabilities that brings into picture. And that is where I see a lot of industrial IoTs are adapting to it. So that is the kind of approach we have to gradually go towards if we are deploying IoT at this scale.
Yeah. And thanks, Smriti, for that. We have 2 questions on the chat, and I think Kunal Gehlot is also raising a hand. So Kunal, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Kunal, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? Okay. We also have a question from Tanay. Tanay, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question? Yes, Tanay.
Tanay, you are not audible if in case you are talking on mute.
Just a second, I'll just check my.
Sorry, you are not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yes, Tanay, very much.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. So my question is, what are some standards and policies around IoT, data, and cloud security that applications should comply with? So, like if I'm making an application or something, so what are the standard policies and which are around IoT, data, and cloud security that I should keep in my mind?
Thanks, Tanay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So basically, I can take that up and others can add to it. Tanya, there are various governments, various countries, they have their own standards when it comes to various technology deployments. And if you talk about IoT, there are some standard policies that is across the globe. There is a policy that people should not, the IoT service provider or IoT device provider vendor should not give access to reset the default factory settings, because that makes it very easy to crack the password of your IoT device. So that is one of the policies that is followed, and then there is a strong password policy around IoT. But if you want to go into details of what are the standards that one should follow while developing IoT devices, for us in India, there is a Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, MeitY it is called. They have a set of standards that they define, and you have to comply with that if you are developing something on the IoT side to make it in compliance with the security standards.
Yeah. So thank you, ma'am, for answering it. Can I ask one more question? If it's possible.
Yeah, go ahead, Tanay.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a question on Aarogya Setu app. So like a lot of questions have been asked for the privacy and secrecy, and I'm like our data are, you know, like are like is it like protected and is it like safe? So I have a question here. So many apps like Aarogya Setu collect user data from a medical perspective. This is also private information of user. Should I feel comfortable using these apps and sharing my data? So should I be free to use it? Any medical app, anything like Practo or Aarogya Setu, or there's a lot of apps which take the personal data for your health and all those stuffs.
Okay, thanks, Tanay.
Thank you.
Okay, I will attempt it, but I may not be able to answer it. It may be still a diplomatic answer, huh? Okay, so that's a disclaimer. So the point here is, one point you mentioned is Aarogya Setu. Similar to Aarogya Setu, there are similar apps in other countries too, Australia, New Zealand, even in Europe and US as well. So every country has the same question being asked. You are collecting my private data. Where are you storing it? How are you securing it? So government says it's a law and order scenario. When the law and order scenario comes, it's important for us to know that in case you are infected, you are not infecting people around you, right? This is the best way to know that we are able to collect the data and manage it somehow, right? So while doing so, as per the rules, as per the what you can say protocol, we do have a privacy bill, which was recently ruled out before the COVID, by the way. So which actually takes care of what you call it's almost similar to the GDPR, which takes care of the privacy. How do you secure it? How do you reliably store it? And how you destroy it? All those rules are already there. So those are already given. I mean, I don't want to go through the GDPR story, but the point here is the controls are already written in the books. Whether they're implemented or not, just don't ask me. Okay? So the point here is they are liable in case it's not handled, right? So second part, can I use comfortably any application like Practo or any other? So the point is, I think I come to this, maybe that's something which we wanted to talk anyway, I'll pick that up now. So there are vulnerabilities in everything, every device what we are using, right? So I'll give you an example of aeroplanes, right? People never used to fly in aeroplanes long back, 20 years back. They used to be worried it will be met with accident. I don't want to go through it. If somebody is going, they used to do a proper send off as if somebody's, So that's the way it used to be. Now everybody using aeroplane like just like that, So that's the story now. Any new technology, we have some kind of vulnerabilities. It will be get fixed in the matter of time. That's why we are all security professionals here to fix those gaps, right? So think about this. There are like FDA actually, which is actually a governing body for in US for giving certification on medical equipment. It was found that pacemaker, which is actually the heart speed could be adjusted with the pacemaker. There were vulnerabilities found in one of the model of the pacemaker. Imagine that. Imagine that your actually heart could be hacked and somebody can click a button and you are dead. Really bad, And there are scenarios where BMW car, which is actually having a chip inside, and that's been actually exploited and it has been brought into middle of the road. It's not sci-fi movie, it's real. You can see the videos online, right? I'm not taking just BMW. There are multiple other cars as well. Just for an example, I quoted. So there are vulnerabilities in the vehicular IoT or its mobile IoT or even the health IoT, right? So there is a certain risk in every device you are using. Even the Fitbit is actually continuously capturing your sleep pattern, your moving pattern, your heart rate, almost everything, right? So this is your private information, right? There are few things which you need to understand about privacy. Privacy is something is up to you, right? You decide whether you want to share it, you do not want to share it. That's why something called notice and accept, right? You accepted it to share this information. The other body accepted to actually store it appropriately, right? That's a understanding, but that's something which they're supposed to handle. So when we come to there, I think the controls has to be appropriately implemented. If it is not, the latest laws and regulations like GDPR and even Indian privacy bill, if it goes through that level, people are really paying huge penalties. The Cambridge Analytica story, the story about Uber. So they paid a lot of penalties for collecting the privacy information and didn't store it or didn't handle it appropriately. So there are laws and regulations already exist to handle the privacy of the citizens appropriately, right? That given, but be mindful of any time when you are buying something. Imagine the light there, it's actually smart light, right? It could be controlled by Google Home. I just say switch off, then it will get switched off. By the way, I switched it off. The smart part is switched off now. But imagine that it is also recording my voice. Consider that scenario. So everything, whatever we are talking in the bedroom, can be recorded and could be heard by anybody. So these are the privacy concerns we should be aware of, understand it, and use it accordingly. Right? As I said, it is not a right answer, but that's the answer available.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thanks.
Satya, Sujata, and Smriti, we also have questions on the chat, and you can answer them on the chat as well. And Kunal, do you want to go and ask your question? Unmute yourself and ask your question now.
Sure. Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I had some mic issues earlier. So I have this question for Smriti ma'am. So as we discussed about the IoT and cloud infrastructure, like Pragati ma'am told about the Telangana situation. So that's about the industrial application of IoT. What about I as an individual? I'm developing an IoT and cloud application. What are some key considerations to keep in mind from a security perspective for like developing a application for myself?
Sure. Although that is not my domain of expertise, consumer market, but I'll try to attempt to answer the question. Kunal, when we develop an application, you are an application developer and you're developing something on IoT. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So one is you will have to, as I said earlier, you'll have to follow certain standards when you are developing the application on IT, and those standards are listed by each country's government. There's a particular body which is MITI in our case, in our country. You can refer to those standards while developing it. But apart from that, generically you should be keeping in mind few things whenever you have a connectivity from your IoT device. Will it be connecting back to internet directly, or it will be connecting to some SaaS applications? How will that be? If you can just briefly tell about it.
Like I was thinking about using a Raspberry Pi to detect number plates of the cars. So like if it's on a secure gate, so I would be sending that data to, I think, Azure cloud databases. So I'm not sure about it yet, but that's what my whole picture is.
Sure. So that is a comparatively safer application to develop, but always keep this in mind because we are entering into an era where everything will be connected to everything, and it becomes a responsibility of network also to take care of data in transit or the kinetic data that is going on. So you should develop a practice of using tunnels whenever you're doing the data transaction, because there are chances of man-in-the-middle attacks. When you're transferring data from your IoT devices, the Raspberry Pi, back to the Azure cloud data center. So you can read a little bit about the software defined networking and the kind of forwarding mechanisms it provides in terms of tunnels. So you can obviously get away with the heavier tunnels like IPsec. You don't need to deploy that, but there are other options available with the power of software defined networking. You can look at those options. You should take care of the data that you're sending from the Raspberry Pi to the Azure cloud infrastructure through those mechanisms, and then there are standard policies to deploy your basic encryption for the data at rest, etc., that you can look up for at the MITI portal. Did that answer your question?
Maybe Sujata, you can add something on the application area.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. I have another question. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
So,
the other question is,
let me give some more inputs, Kunal. Then you can ask a question, right? So no doubt, the IoT devices keeps collecting large volumes of personal data of an individual or the private information, and you tend to put that data in the cloud, right? So now, if you aren't aware of how the data is secure, how the data should be secured. For example, if you are collecting the PII information and you are storing that in the cloud, right? So without knowing what kind of a deployment model that you will be choosing, and who will, at the end of the day, since you are collecting, so you are the owner of the data, right? And you should make sure that the data is encrypted, right? And make sure the access to that particular data is not, excessive access to that data is not given to anybody, right? So make sure you implement proper, authentication and authorization controls. What happens is that most of the cloud-based attacks that you see in recent past. So I would like to take one, quickly touch upon one, recent attack. So since Smriti at the beginning, started talking about the Starbucks, kind of a situation. So I would like to mention that if you this, this cloud computing comes with a lot of secure APIs being exposed and things like that, right? So but if that API is not secured enough, and if it falls in the wrong hands, right, so the hackers can get hold of that particular key which is hard coded or kept it in the GitHub repositories and things like that, and they can get into the internal systems or the internal networks, and they can get hold of the data that is stored on the systems, right? So now in the Starbucks scenario, the same thing happened. So one of the API key, which was called a Jumbo Cloud API key, which was kept in their public GitHub repository, one hacker came across that particular key, and he could get into the internal systems of the coffee chain, right? So Jump Cloud API is nothing but it's an Active Directory management platform, which was actually built as an alternative for Azure AD, right? So it actually provides the user management and single sign-on kind of things, right? So with this kind of negligence, which is taken by the developers, so people can create the authorized users on the systems, right? So not only that, and some things like you might store some information on the S3 buckets, right? So one of the Verizon attack which happened, which was a very, very huge and critical attack, which exposed 14 million, US customers' data, right? So S3 buckets were supposed to be kept in a with the private access, right? But that was kept it in the public access, right? And the WAF configurations and all that. So with respect to the IoT resources, or with respect to the IoT devices, so make sure whatever data you are mindful about what data that you are collecting as part of this, and make sure you understand the encryption methodologies and use them appropriately. Use the strong encryption algorithms so that you encrypt the data at rest and in transit, so that the data is not leaked out even though somebody gets hold of your data, right? So it will be in the encrypted form, and make sure when you encrypt it, the key is safe and placed it in a secure place, right? And also make sure you are hardening your IoT devices, and you are not giving out or keeping the default passwords used by the people, right? And also implement proper access control mechanisms so that unauthorized users don't get access to the data that you are collecting, right? So, and apart from that, so make sure you do not unnecessarily collect. What is necessary, make sure you just collect that, and also follow the regulations that are laid out by government. I no doubt government India wanted to invest a lot of money and huge money in developing the smart cities and smart homes and anything to make everything smart, right? So but one has to be mindful about what the kind of a data that they're collecting, and ensure proper controls are implemented.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kunal. Kamar, you had a question. I saw you raise your hand and also put it in chat. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, Kumar? Okay, I'll just read out the question. The question is, for the security of IoT, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, etc., isn't some of the security can be built in even after miniaturization, say an integrated digital signature?
Sorry, is it there in the chat?
It's in the chat. So the question is, can some of the security be built in to IoT devices like Arduino and Raspberry?
No, I mean, I think certificates is something people are trying. The digital certification, digital signatures are being tried on some of these kind of technologies, but not everything, right? Maybe others can add on. So there are, I mean, as somebody said already in one of the chat, right? So it's like give the password once and forget. Do you actually change the password of the smart refrigerator or smart washing machine or smart light? No, right? So that's the challenge. Nobody does that. So that's obvious. If that is declared somewhere and if it is known, then it's a problem. That's the point what we are speaking. And not only that, we don't actually upgrade the chips. What we do, replace generally the firmware. It is called firmware, right? So most of the cases, that is where the challenge comes in. And so this is something which we are currently thinking about applications, what we are designing right now, which is design the security in the beginning, right? So even the applications, when you are designing, you have to put the security controls up within when you are designing, not after, right? You design the application, load it on the production, and then do the penetration testing, and then fix it. That's not the story, right? Should have applied the controls before. The same thing applies to IoT. The firmware when it is being designed, and also the message bus. That's the key thing. They use a very small message bus. The message protocol itself is very thin layer with which it will work. It is not the very secure TCP protocol. The protocol itself is very small, and you may need to read about that. That's very vulnerable. So there are few things which are there. So what they are trying to do now, considering all these security concerns, the standards are coming in, right? One thing I just want to tell you again, being practical, I am. See, technology comes first. Controls, regulations comes later, right? Technology comes because there is a requirement. So technology comes first, and then there will be vulnerabilities and it gets fixed. So the same way I'm saying you again now. So there are situations in some certain IoT devices. That's why whenever you are buying an IoT device, you need to be very careful on how you use it, right? If your Siri is always listening, it's obviously listening everything what is happening. Or your Alexa is always listening, it is listening all the time, right? You need to be aware when to switch it off, right? There was a very valid question or a very valid statement mentioned by Gartner in one of the conference. So why everybody is asking, is cloud secure? We should be asking, are you using cloud securely? You understand? So that's what matters. Even if we know that this is vulnerable, there might be chances that we will be losing it. So then we should also use it appropriately. Yeah. So again, the point here is yes. To the question, yes, there is a possibility, but not every IoT device is equipped to handle that. Not every device is coming with digital signature.
Thanks, Satya. We have another question.
We are already at 8. Okay, just be mindful of the time. Are we guys to continue?
Okay, last question maybe then. So the question is, what is a threat model and how do we get started with it for a cloud application?
Okay. Somebody want to attempt it?
Yeah. So first of all, make sure where your assets are, the hosts are placed, right? So make sure where your host systems are. Which if you are following a multi-cloud, you should be aware of where your servers are placed and what are your assets, right? So like Satyaji was talking about, what are your crown jewels, right? So make sure what are your, where you are placing them, how you are placing them, and what kind of controls that you are applying to secure and safeguard them, right? So there are various threat modeling, platforms which are available. If you talk about the Microsoft Stride model, right? So that is a very good, thing to start off with to analyze the attack vectors, the threat threat vectors and to identify the assets and see what kind of possible attacks that can come when you are developing the cloud application, right? And make sure you identify what are the threats that you can foresee. It could be anything, right? It could be right from your application security, VOVAS top 10 cloud security related vulnerabilities, or it could be from your network, right? So make sure you identify those threats and give them a rating, give them a risk analysis, and then make sure you plan the mitigation, work out on a mitigation plan to fix those, right? So that is how you can go ahead, and you can, I mean, I'm not here to promote or recommend any vendor here to go with the just because I'm part of the Microsoft. I'm not telling you to use the Stride, but there are various other threat models that are available, so you can free to use them and implement the threat model for that.
Yeah, thank you, Sujata.
I guess there
Smriti, you wanted to...
Pragati, I think there is one more, I mean, couple more questions probably.
Yes. Yeah. So then there is one question on, okay. What is your opinion on passwordless authentication, specifically in relationship to FIDO standard? Do you see FIDO gaining traction in the current circumstances?
Okay, I don't want to answer FIDO, but in general, I'll speak about passwordless. So recently at NIST, NIST, which is actually a standard body for cybersecurity controls, declared that you're not required to actually recertify password. Yeah, you can go ahead with just give one password and let it stay, right? So that's one. And second is passwordless authentication is better than password, asking them to change password every 45 days or 90 days. Because what happens when you are changing again and again, there's a chance that you are forgetting. So you're worried that you will forget and you will write it somewhere, maybe on the notice board, everybody knows. So that's why the passwordless control is actually being adopted by majority of the companies now. So there are solutions available, which is called adaptive authentication. So there are adaptive authentication available. So you just heard from Pragati, eKYC is done by sitting at your home, right? Government is also allowing authentication to happen, what you can say, automatically, right? So there are mechanisms coming in. So alternate authentication, think about alternate authentications if it is not the password. Alternate authentications could be what you are. That could be a biometric feature, which is your fingerprint or your voice or your retina scan or your any of these things, right? Even your voice pattern, your keyboard pattern, a lot of things are there in your what you can say, identity authentication management solutions offered by various products, including Micro Focus, right? So even Microsoft, right? We do have adaptive authentication, including facial recognition, right? Now, for example, now people are working from home, right? And then they are handling sensitive data. If it is banking data, what is the best way to authenticate, right? The best way to authenticate is not just the password. It's possible that they're written on the room somewhere and everybody knows it. The alternate authentications are biometrics, like as I just mentioned, the facial authentication or your fingerprint which they are carrying, or in some cases, if it is government, then they are verifying with Aadhaar or they are verifying back with PAN card through authentication mechanism. By the way, these units, what I just mentioned, do offer APIs. So if you want to verify Aadhaar, you can actually subscribe for it. Every time you send a request, Aadhaar passes that. You need to provide in certain way, and then it passes the information that this guy is the right guy or this girl is the right girl. You know, that is already available. So as coming to the point, we are not speaking about the particular product, but for sure, the adaptive authentication or passwordless authentication is going to happen, and most of the banks already started it. They don't care about your password right now. If I log into my mobile, actually, when I log into any of the bank, ICICI, Axis Bank, even DBS, they ask me, do you want to log in with your fingerprint rather than the password, right? So I don't actually use the password anymore. I just put my finger and it takes, and I log into the bank. right? So it's already there. They are not mandating it, you know. So and even RBI is not mandating it. I'm speaking about the regulatory industry. If the regulatory industry is not mandating, it's obviously that non-regulated industry also do not.
Yeah. Should we take one last question or should we wrap up?
No, I am good actually. That depends upon the audience. So
Okay.
I guess I saw one question from Rupa specifically mentioning.
Yeah, and before we come to Rupa's question, right, Satya, you mentioned something very interesting that a lot of people are actually, logging in using your biometrics like fingerprints, etc. Now, here's a counter opinion that I hear that if I lose a password, I can reset it. But if I lose my fingerprints, I can't replace my thumb. So that also brings to Rupa's question, how do you store that data securely and then how do you classify it?
So these are situations which are, that's why there are not just a fingerprint. We do have a case recently we are working on. So face recognition is not 100% accurate, you know that, right? Sometimes you put your, maybe you hair color become white, or you didn't comb your hair properly, or you have some face mask. So it don't recognize. The facial recognition doesn't work. 75% of the time it is accurate, 30% of the time it doesn't. So then you need to have an alternate mechanism called out-of-band authentication. So there are alternate mechanisms to avoid this kind of problems, as you said. If you are not able to access the biometrics, then there is always a second plan B, designed in the flow. In majority of the solutions, what people design, that for example, the face shield recognition doesn't work or fingerprint doesn't work, it might come back to password, by the way, or it might come back to a OTP, right? So out-of-band authentication. So it will actually send a password to your mailbox or onto your phone so that the authentication happens. You know, that's called out-of-band authentication. That do happen, right? So that, just to answer your question, Pragati. So the next one for Rupa, I guess your question was actually about, so how do you, is it easy to actually classify, right? If we have what huge load of data, how do you easily classify? How do we retain, right? So data, as it is becoming, as I said, data being the new oil. Now you imagine that, I'll tell you one story. Like recently when we moved to the new house, we want to make this one beautiful picture of 20 photos. I do have 20,000 photos. Very difficult, you know, you understand that. We do have a huge load of data. It's very difficult to identify which is good and which is not good. Same applies to our official data also. The classification and retention is getting a challenge at the root of every organization. So, so there are models coming in. How do we classify based on the pattern and the content, etc. So there are analytic models which are available right now. You just pass the raw data or structured or unstructured data. It will actually bring you forward some of those parameters which you declare. So for example, you believe certain composition of your formula is very secretive and it shouldn't be going, then you give that some of the parameters there so that just search for it. Then it actually calls out from this whatever terabytes of data and tells these files have this kind of data. So maybe you like to store it, right? Or for example, if you are having some financial transactions or signed deals, so there might be some contractual wordings through which you can identify them. So again, it is not again foolproof solution, but there is a possibility that you can do it through keywords and composition figures by calling out not just structured data. What I mean structured data is you have an Excel data, which is your databases, records. Unstructured data is your PDFs and your pictures and your GIF files, Word documents. It's very difficult, which is actually in a different format. You can't read it and actually process it by yourself, understand it. So there are methods already available to identify and classify them as well, right? It looks complex, but there are, again, we are using the trending technologies like machine learning to do that so that you can classify them. Yeah, this itself is a service called discovery and classification.
Thank you, Satya. Okay, I think we can wrap up now. And thank you, Thank you, attendees, for joining us in the panel. This is the first panel under Security Speak, and we continue to have many more such discussions and workshops and meetups under the Security Speak banner. Thank you, Paras, for hosting us. Over to you for closing remarks, and thank you very much, Satya, Sujata, and Smriti, for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with us. Over to you, Paras.
Thank you. So I guess it went well, and like I told you, Pragati, it won't be even like we won't have to prepare so much. It will go well because people are already experienced and they know what to talk. So that's not going to be a problem. And I guess that happened. So again, like as Pragati said, thank you very much, everyone, attendees and the panelists. Thank you so much for joining and keeping it more interesting, taking questions from the audience, from our community, which is very, very helpful for them. And we will be putting this recording on the Reactor Global YouTube account because we have audience from all over the world, from all over the reactors. So other people also watch it. I will be sharing the link by next week with you, with everyone. I have also done a tweet. I was not able to tag Satya there. I didn't find you there on Twitter. So probably I'll make something, probably a LinkedIn post or something for you. And yeah, that's about it, I guess. Sujata, you're on mute.
So Satyaji's secret is it's capital D, Divatari capital D. So that's why I missed in one of the Twitter's account tweet, and next tweet I figured it out.
I didn't know that. Okay, but anyway, so just on the light side, I don't use much of the Twitter. I'm actually more on LinkedIn, but it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Both the platforms are fine with me.
No worries.
Okay.
No worries.
And just to close, I happened to follow the Satya ma'am, and it was a secure account on Twitter. I could not follow her. It is obsessed with security.
I don't know. Seriously, I'm telling you. I'm not, maybe it's like maybe 5 years or 6 years back. I mean, I don't follow much of Twitter, so somebody can post it, but I mean, maybe I need to make it insecure, I guess. Or I may need to come into the flow.
Yeah, just wanted to close from my side. Thank you very much, Paras, for hosting us today, and thank you very much, Pragati, for inviting us and making us to be part of your Microsoft Security Speak launch series. And we are very much glad to be part of this, and wish you all the best for your team. I want to see more and more such initiatives coming from your team, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Sujata. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is it a formality that we need to say thanks?
No,
I think
not at all.
I'll also say thank you to everyone here. And by the way, I think it's a good idea that you are starting such a security platform for people to speak and interact, and appreciate that, and happy to be part of it. Look forward for more talks like this.
Pragati, let's take I'll take a photograph and I can put it on Twitter. Like if you can, and anyone is like most welcome. Just join in. Just put your cameras on. Let's take a group selfie, and then I can post it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Sujata, Smriti, your cameras are also turned off. Can you please turn them on?
Yeah.
They are on. I
No,
can
they're
see them.
on.
It's on.
Okay.
Everyone from the attendees, if you are most welcome to join. I'm already there. I'll take a photograph. Nobody's joining. Perfect. Then okay, people are joining. Hello, Ramesh.
Hi.
Anyone else who's joining? Last chance. 1, 2, 3. Okay, here we go. One more. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good weekend.
Happy weekend.